So you've decided to sell your business. Now what? Are you comfortable with your decision? Are you ready for it? And who are you going to sell to? What are the pros and cons there? We'll answer these questions and address some additional concerns next. Welcome back. In a prior video, we talked about business owners who are thinking about selling their businesses, but let's go a step further and talk about what happens once they decide to sell. We're continuing our conversation today with Matt Gubicza, Senior Vice President, Team Leader for Univest Commercial Banking, and Brian Hungarter, Vice President and Wealth Advisor for Girard. Thanks for being here again, guys. So we talked in the last video about the decision to possibly sell, but let's now take it a step further and talk about they want to sell. The business owner, the client is looking to sell. Take us through that.
What I would say is you have no idea what you're about to get into. And so it is hard to take your everyday responsibilities, running a business, being the owner of a business, and then take that and just bolt on the additional responsibility of creating a data site, transferring information, management meetings, all the other stuff. By the way, hiding this from some people along the way. I mean, there's processes associated with it. So it's really hard for anyone to really get their arms around what that means while they have to run the business on a day-to-day basis all the while. It's really a challenge.
Across my career, I can't think of a single sales cycle where I didn't wish we got started 18 to 24 months earlier at least. Yeah. There's so much to consider, whether it's who you're selling to, what you're receiving in turn for the sale, any retained controlling interest or not, lifestyle implication, legacy implication, legal, tax. There are so many check boxes that we need to discuss. You're going to hear the refrain commonly, start with the end in mind, right? Once we know the end goal, it's easy to paint the path to get there, and we're going to talk about some of that now. Start sooner than you think is the lasting message.
Yeah, so we finance a fair amount of M&A transactions, right? And there's a lot of parties involved. We're involved as a bank. There's the buyer, other financing that may sit behind us, and then there's the seller. You would be shocked how often the one that holds up the deal is the one that has the most incentive in the back end at the end of the rainbow, and it's the seller, because everyone else in that table has a fair amount of deal experience. A lot of times with the selling owner, there's no deal experience. There's plenty of experience with the company, but no deal experience. And so you just don't know what you're getting into, and it's just hard to get to all the steps that are required to make sure the deal goes through.
So let's talk about the types of other businesses or the ways to sell the business, right? Our last example, we talked about private equity. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so look, if you're going to sell to PE, one, it's not like they all come in the same shape and size, right? There's sort of mega PE, and then there's sort of smaller, there's independent sponsors. There's lots of different types, right? And all of those things come with their own considerations. But you have to ask yourself the question, what is your value? What are you really looking for? Are you looking to maximize price, or are you trying to make sure that the legacy sort of holds on, or somewhere in between, right? And so you got to pick the horse based on all of those considerations, but ultimately you have to make a decision and make an assessment, because everybody's looking to make the deal happen, right? So maybe telling you things you want to hear versus things that are in reality. So, but if you sell to PE, you're going to have to give up control. That's just the reality of it.
And many times not too different than if you sell to a competitor either, right? Oftentimes that competitive player will come in with their own vision for how to expand or grow or scale your business, and that may or may not include your name, your strategy, your employees, et cetera, et cetera. So it does become that push-shove of maximizing value on the sale versus, we'll call them the intangible considerations of employee retention, of legacy, of some lasting control over the business, whatever that might be.
Yeah, and what I would say is, like, if you're talking about a competitor, strategic acquirer, whatever, very few, if any of those, are doing that deal without some kind of, and the word is synergies, right? And synergies, that means cuts. And cuts mean people, places, and otherwise. So you got to be on board with that. You got to be upfront about that. Hey, if this is not on the table, or it is on the table, whatever. And so, you got to be clear with the buyer, this is what we want.
And what about selling to your fellow employees, selling to the family, things like that?
Yeah, and there's different ways to effectuate a transaction. The management team and the rest of the employees, they're ESOPs, right? Employee stock ownership plans. There are, you can bring in some outside financing, but it brings with it challenges, right? Typically your management team, who may be the most excited about buying the company, or most ready to buy the company, given the nature and the knowledge of the inner workings of the business, they also don't have the capital, right? So you got to figure out a way to either come up, get them introduced to the capital, or be ready to take back a note that will pay you off over time as opposed to getting a chunk of change up front.
I'd say the biggest difference we see is whether it's selling to employees or potentially a transaction involving family retention. Many times it's a lower number on the sale price side of things. Pros and cons to that too. Sometimes we actually want lower valuations for tax reasons, for legacy, whatever that might be. Yes, you're going to pick up additional control over the lasting entity likely if you go this route. It might cost you financially. Can you afford that? Is that important to you? Those are the things that we would want to explore on the front end to make sure that we are choosing the right path from the outset, both from a risk perspective and from a return perspective.
So there's a lot of different options of who to sell to, but the main conversation should be with the client of really drilling down to see what they're looking to do, how much value they're looking, what their legacy is going to be. And again, it's an emotional decision. You might want to want the business continue the way that you built it. That's a lot of information. It's all good information, and thank you guys for joining. And thanks to you all for watching. If you can relate to this situation and you would like to have a conversation, please visit our websites, meetgirard.com and univest.net. You can find our contact information as well as the rest of the teams. We're here to provide you with guidance and direction as you go through the sales process. Thank you very much. Until next time, take care.